Thanks for listening to Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast, keeping you up to date with the latest in American soccer. And don't forget to subscribe.
On this week's episode of Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast, Steve Brisendine, Sporting KC beat writer, joins us to discuss SKC's U.S. Open Cup title victory on Wednesday. Dan from Nats Abroad calls in to discuss young Americans abroad, such as Josh Sargent and Weston McKennie. MLS looking to restructure its playoff format. We look to see if the ideas proposed are better for the league. All this on this week's episode of Uncle Sam's Soccer Pod.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast. I'm Steven Jodorand, the man who switched his Twitter account after last week's episode, Arman Kafai, to Arman Kafai, is on the line with me. What's going on, buddy?
Nothing much. I thought that Twitter change would make things a lot easier. You can just find me by looking at my name.
Yeah, that's 100% for sure. But listeners, we got an awesome episode in store for you. We got multiple guests calling in. We're just waiting for a couple of them to call in. But Arman, we don't ever often do this. Opening thoughts until Steve calls in here in the next couple of minutes. Do you have an opening thought from the weekend of American soccer?
Oh, well, as an FC Dallas beat writer and as someone who watched them play on Saturday night against Minnesota while waiting for a buddy of mine, I saw an absolute implosion of a team. It was, I don't know what to even make of it. People say they've never seen a collapse like this in MLS history. I don't know what to even make of it at this point. This team just has no cohesion. They don't know what they're going to do. I think at this point, the panic button has been pressed. They're probably going to miss the playoffs. It's looking messy for what used to be MLS's darlings with the homegrowns and whatnot.
Yeah, no. Oscar Pereira, is he on the hot seat?
I think he has the ability to have one bad year. But, I mean, if next year it's a repeat, it's exactly what happened to Shellis Hyman. I mean, do I want them to can him? Absolutely not. But, I mean, I don't know. You can blame Oscar for this, or you can blame the team for bringing in just players on the budgeted salary. MLS is evolving. You can't just go on and, I guess, moneyball it of sorts. I think they need at least one dominant player, and it's looking really bad. It's looking really bad.
I wonder who takes more of the blame, because you have three different components to FC Dallas. You have the terrible front office that just can't get anything together. Then you have a brilliant coach that it's hard to blame him. And then you have the players that seem to not want to play for the ownership. With what happened with Urruti Barrios, what happened with Kellen Acosta, with the locker room, with the reports that you and I have been talking about, how the locker room might not necessarily be, glued together. The glue guys don't seem to be gluing the locker room together.
I mean, if you think about locker room wise, who's the glue guy? Do you have any? Because I can't think of any off the top of my head. I don't think Zimmerman's a glue guy. As much as I love Walker, I don't think he's a glue guy. I mean, I would say Hedges, but I mean, I don't think they honestly have one. I mean, I forgot who it was. I think it was Steve Davies from the FC Dallas broadcast mentioned how it looks like FC Dallas doesn't have like an enforcer. Yeah, which is relatively true. I mean, will we see a roster overhaul this winter? I mean, that's a question I want to see.
Well,
but I mean, before we move on, I just want to say credit to Minnesota. They've completely turned around the way they've played from the beginning of the season. You can't take away how good they played on Saturday night and how good they've been playing recently. They're just completely flip-flopped from what they were at the beginning of the season.
I was watching some you know how in the game of soccer, you'll often have some sort of song played, and the fans are there, clapping along. Forget what song. Say again.
Wonderwall.
Minnesota United's got a pretty good soccer atmosphere. Like, good for them. Like, I really enjoy it. My quick opening thought, because Steve here is calling in any minute. Michael Bradley was talking about the turf when the Rebs were playing Toronto on Saturday. And he, quote, "It's ridiculous, the field. The football lines, the whole thing is a joke." And I'm starting to tell you that MLS has to be very concerned when one of its American players, one of its leading marketed players like Michael Bradley, is complaining about turf, especially the lines. It's not good for the league, because if he's noticing it, then so are the European players and the South American players and the players abroad. If you are a franchise that does not have grass as its natural field in the stadium, you're going to suffer with the marketing ability from the player standpoint, and it's starting to unravel in front of MLS, especially with the comments Bradley said.
Yeah, I really wouldn't say necessarily turf, but I do believe turf does play a big impact. I think specific types of turf. For example, I don't know if the Atlanta United turf is that bad, but I mean, I know New England's turf isn't really that good.
No, actually, what's funny, Arman, is the Patriots, obviously, because that's Kraft's main concern is the Patriots. They put in they put in a new turf over the summer, and it costs a fortune, right? It was supposed to be softer grass, and it's supposed to actually be better for soccer. One game, the opening night game against Kansas City, the Chiefs, the players complained. Kraft's like, all right, front office said, screw it, we're ripping it up, we're putting back the turf, and yeah, the Revs suffer because of that. But the football, it's one thing, the turf, it's another thing with the football lines and all that mess, too. So, I mean, Michael Bradley is speaking, I think, to more about the football lines on the field. I'm thinking the turf is starting to become an issue. Like Atlanta United, I wonder how long they can deal with playing on turf before somebody's like, you got to put in grass.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it happening in the foreseeable future, but I do believe, I think turf is going to cause a little bit of an issue, especially if New England doesn't move out of Gillette. I mean, they're like MLS, like 0.5 or something right now. It's pretty garbage how they can't move out of playing in. And
Boston's
Gillette
got
Stadium.
A soccer market. I want to remind people, Boston has a genuine soccer market. Anyway, joining us right now from Children's Mercies Park in the press box is Steve, MLS beat writer for Sporting KC, MLSsoccer.com. How are you doing?
Doing well. How are you doing today?
We're doing great. You just wrapped up with the LA Sporting KC game. How was it?
I did. I think it was Sporting was avoided a hangover, which was a big deal after the Open Cup win. I think they've got veterans on this team. They're professionals. They're not going to take a game off. And LA, LA's done for the year. I mean, they're not going to make the playoffs. They don't look good at all. And it's a rough moment for them. But I think Sporting did what they needed to do today. Got the 3 points, put themselves in a good position, still going forward. They, depending on what happens with Portland tonight, they're second right now. So all in all, it wasn't a spectacular game, but there were some nice moments for Sporting.
For sure. Steve, let's go back to a couple days where Sporting KC hosted the New York Red Bulls, ended up lifting the U.S. Open Cup. Were you at the game? How'd you think?
What did you think of it? It was an entertaining final. I thought both teams came out, went after it hard. Great atmosphere. I think Sporting really executed their game plan well, which is look for mismatches, find space, and deliver balls in places that New York really couldn't get to. It wasn't a typical Cup final in that both teams didn't sit back and then play cagey, play cynical, and try not to lose. They both came out and went for it. I think the experience showed, though. I mean, you've got guys, Sporting guys who've been around this club even since the late 2000s and the last decade, and you've got guys who know how to win titles here. It's 4 cups in 6 years here. I think that kind of veteran leadership, that experience is really pretty much what carried the night for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Stevie. I watched the match, and I thought the match was relatively open compared to some other Cup finals that I had seen. But SKC traded away their top scorer Dom Dwyer during the season, and a lot of people were skeptical where they're going to get the goals. It looks like it hasn't affected them at all, to be honest.
Yeah, they're somebody put up a stat today. Diego Rubio has 5 goals in 7 starts for Sporting. Dwyer had 5 goals in 14 starts for Sporting. Latif Blessing has really come on. Daniel Chaloui, who's got goals in these last 2 matches, just has really started to blossom. So Ed Gerso has been doing well on scoring for all year. He's been their leading scorer. So the goals are coming, and they're starting to come more frequently now. And Dom contributed a lot to a lot of success. But one of the things about Sporting is they've never been entirely dependent on one player. That's never been Peter Vermeer's MO, where you hang everything on one guy and expect him to carry the club. So when Dwyer got traded away, it's sort of the next man up approach, and they've really been doing well with that.
With how well Sporting KC has been this past season, winning the U.S. Open Cup, what's the expectation going forward into the playoffs?
Look, the last thing that Vermeer said to them in the locker room before he came into the news conference is, we're not done. This isn't the only time we're going to do that this year. So the expectation here is always you're going to compete for multiple trophies. I mean, you see the results over the years. They've never gone more than a year without a trophy since they moved into the park, into Children's Mercy, rebranded and moved in. And it's a run that most teams would kill for. But the expectation every year here, then they say it because they mean it, is they expect to contend for multiple trophies. And the Shield's out of reach this year with Toronto FC. Even if Toronto keeps swooning, the Shield's out of reach. But MLS Cup is very much within reach. And they believe they've got as good a chance as any and a better chance than quite a few to win it.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. And you were talking about that success where you're talking about the trophies. They've won, 3 U.S. Open Cups in 6 years? I mean, I think it really shows how important they take this cup compared to some other clubs within the league.
Well, and it's silly that clubs don't take it seriously. I mean, first off, it's the easiest way to get into the Champions League.
Exactly.
And you get in the Champions League, then you get more money, then you get more exposure. You get a lot of benefits from the Champions League, and plus which you get the psychological benefit to your players of hoisting a trophy. That's
Absolutely.
Invaluable. And the teams that don't take the Open Cup seriously, I think, really miss out. They focus too much on the Shield. They focus too much on MLS Cup. But it's why would you ignore a domestic cup that puts you in the CCL?
I wonder, Steve, and Arman, you can answer this. The importance of the U.S. Open Cup, do clubs not take it seriously because the exposure, only, I would say, since probably last season or maybe even 2 seasons ago, hasn't always been, ESPN's finally broadcasting games, but it hasn't always been something up and center. You get into the Champions Leagues, but the money isn't necessarily all that rewarding. Why do you think there's this weird imbalance of some clubs taking it seriously, like Sporting KC, and other clubs just kind of like, it's whatever?
I'll let Arman take this one first. I have some ideas. I want to hear Arman's thoughts, Joe.
That's a tough one. I mean, I feel like I think just some clubs take just priority on certain competitions. For example, I mean, you see it across the pond in the English leagues. You see like some teams not taking the cup seriously and more focusing on the league and whatnot. I honestly can't fathom a way to figure out why, because I do agree with what Steve said. I do agree that it is one of the easiest ways to get into the continental game. It is one of the easiest ways to get exposure for your club and also to, in the end, hoist a trophy. I mean, you saw FC Dallas, how much significance they put on hoisting that trophy and how much that meant that the MLS Cup exit was almost like forgotten by the ownership and by some players on the team because they won the Open Cup. They won a trophy. It's one of the easiest routes to getting a trophy. So, I mean, I truly don't understand why they do it, but I mean, it happens. So, Steve, what's your thoughts on that?
I have a couple of thoughts. One, I think it's like you said, the tournament really, it's been around forever. It was the oldest professional tournament and sport tournament. But one thing I think that works against it is